We're joined now from Kaduna by the Vice Chairman of the Kaduna State Peace Commission. And with us in the studio here is Dr. Saleh Momale. No, actually, it's David Okoror, who's with us here in the studio. Well, thank you both of you, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start with you, Mr. Okoror. I mean, listening to Nisi Gabriel's report, apparently there have been several attempts over the years to find a lasting solution to the endless wanton killings, not only in southern Kaduna, the whole of Kaduna, the northwest, the northeast, and different parts of the country. Why do you think this problem persists without a solution in sight?
I think that, thanks for having me arise. I think that we should understand the problem in Kaduna is a reflection of what's happening in Plateau and other part of north central Nigeria. It's a situation where you find that security is being mixed with ethnicity, with religion and politics. And where you have issues like security being mixed with ethnicity and religion and politics, it becomes difficult to really find a solution to the problem. I think broadly speaking, whether in Kaduna, whether in Plateau or Benue, the problem is around the use of agricultural land, the attempts that the locals, or what you call the indigenes, feeling that those who they call settlers are coming to try to rule over them forcefully. And then the third is the activities of Hausa Muslim, Hausa Fulani jihadists versus Christian militancy. So when you bring these three together, and it boils over. And over time, government have really not been able to have a hold on this, because you need to address the ethnic, religious, and political issues before you can even talk about addressing the security issues. So the history that your narrative had given earlier is spot on. You recall that the Zago Katav riot was a massive one, and it was thought that after that riot that government was going to take actions to address it. But you find that years down the road, that actions that have been taken by government have been really inadequate. People think that what you need to do is to deploy more security assets, but really you cannot address issues like this that have religious dimensions, that have ethnic dimension, with just deployment of military and other security assets. So what you see, the repeat you see, people being killed, and then you say sorry, and then people get killed again. It's a cycle that has been on for a long time that don't seem to be able to end soon, except new strategies are adopted to address the issues.
Let's bring in Saleh here, Dr. Saleh, quickly here. Listening to David, one of the key concerns here, first we must establish that there is a cycle of violence, and of course the concern now is how to break the cycle. Now speak to us, because he said there is a three-dimensional problem to what we're going through in that axis. How difficult is it for the leaders as well as the country to sit on a table to speak to these three, and if there are others, by every means, share with us?
Thank you very much for bringing this topical issue once again to the discussion. The recent happenings in Zangon Kataf is quite unfortunate, it's condemnable. Wherever lives are lost, life is very precious and should never be taken under any guise or under any circumstance. So we in Kaduna State Government, the Kaduna State Peace Commission, we condemn this violence in totality. Like he said, over a very long time, not only within Kaduna State, but let me say Nigeria as a whole, the country has not been able to establish a common goal, a common vision for the entire citizens of the country. And this have led different segments of the society to begin to develop their own unique perceptions, their own unique thoughts about how things should be done, how resources should be managed and shared, and who should be able to access resources or use resources in one particular geographical area or the other. And I think it is part of this that has been driven or allowing many of these ethnic, religious, and political dimensions to come into play. where actors with varying interests exploit these differences for their own selfish interests. I think the Southern Kaduna region in the past 3 decades have suffered significantly from these divisions, and it has triggered a lot of reactions and violence in many parts of the state. And like you rightly said, what we are trying to focus on now is, can we be able to engage the citizens of these areas and create a new vision, a new perspectives, a new narratives that will see everybody living within Kaduna State and within the territory of Nigeria as a citizen of Nigeria who has the right and who has the privilege to live in every part of the country, to access resources fairly and to pursue his own livelihood without infringing the rights of others and without others infringing on his own constitutional rights. And I think these are the fundamental issues. For this reason, you see that the Kaduna State government is currently pursuing the citizens' agenda to see every Nigerian, wherever he is. Once you are resident within the territory of Kaduna State, we do not want to distinguish you as an indigene or as a settler. We don't want to distinguish you. We want to see you as a citizen of the state and a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What we are doing, when you have segmented societies, where there is total breakdown in inter-community relations, management of everything becomes extremely difficult. And this is what we have suffered in many parts of Southern Kaduna. Not all parts of Southern Kaduna, but in some areas. And if you look at the cycle of violence, is much more prominent in those areas that have witnessed this breakdown in inter-community relationships that is defined along the ethno-religious divides. So what we are doing now is to bring in the young people, to bring in the intellectuals, to bring in the religious leaders and say, can we be able to come together and create a new narrative that will override all these narratives of ethnic division, of religious division, of resource use conflicts, and see ourselves as citizens that must work together to address and find a way of utilizing the enormous potentials that exist within this region for the collective development of our society. I think this is what we are pursuing at the moment, and until we arrive at this consensus, we will certainly continue to see this. What has made it much, much more difficult is the rising level of insecurity, where banditry groups, many criminal groups with huge proliferation of small arms and light weapons, coupled with the excessive use of drugs, not only within the urban but also within the rural young populations, have exacerbated this crisis, and it therefore becomes extremely difficult to be able to control the criminals that are terrorizing the rural landscape throughout northern Nigeria, but most particularly in the Northwest and Kaduna State in particular. So we have to take this dual approach of rebuilding relations among communities while also working with the security agencies, the community institutions, and all stakeholders to deal with the challenges of insecurity in the form of banditry, terrorism, and other related crimes.
Right. Let's come back to the studio with David Okoror. I mean, you heard what Dr. Saleh said there. I mean, what they've been able to do, or what they're putting in place in the Peace Commission in Kaduna there. I mean, he's broken it down very well for us. But what will it take to solve the indigene-settler dichotomy? What will be the way out? Because that seems to be a major factor in this crisis. And you talked about new strategies that need to be put in place earlier when you were making your submission. What should those strategies be?
Well, what you would need to ask, listening to him, is to say, yes, this government is the Kaduna State government, of course, is at the twin light of its life. And these are the strategies that were adopted even at the beginning of the crisis when this government came in. The question to ask is, have they been successful? If they are not been successful, therefore it means that something is wrong and it is necessary.
What do you think is fundamentally wrong then, that all these measures being put in place don't seem to be working?
Well, there are issues of justice. You can't have progress without justice. You can't have peace without justice. There's also the issue of recognizing that there are people's rights, whether the indigenes that own the land and the settlers, so to speak, that is coming in. and the issue of the readily available weapons that criminals can have. But it's also important for us to realize that it's not as simple as we think. Land that is the basis for this challenge is reducing every day. It's not a renewable asset, and as population increases, development increases, infrastructures are developed, land continue to shrink. It therefore means that we need to develop new ways of cultivating our land. It means that we need to develop new ways of rearing cattle. So we will need to go forward to really bring in technology to address issues. But unfortunately, some people still believe that they must continue to practice their farming or their heading.
Let me comment here, David, and this is to you, David, again. Apologies, we'll come back to you, Dr. Saleh, because every time we talk about the issues with the aim of proffering solutions or highlighting some possible solutions, we still end up talking about the problems. So, David, now you've spoken about environmental issues as well as human issues
and new strategies.
And speaking of new strategies, Saleh spoke about bringing the young, which is very key here, and the religious leaders. You said, well, there's also a religious angle to this. Have you been able to, think out of the box, looking outside the old ways to something new that the country, and specifically these states in question, Kaduna, Plateau, can adopt to fixing the challenge?
Well, there are no easy fixes to it. What it means is that we need to be honest with ourselves and the crisis that we have. And we need to have leaders that are not going to play politics with security, because clearly at the root of all this is politics. People are playing politics with security. And so the problem is not being solved because some people are playing politics with security. So the first element here is to stop politicizing this issue. Number two is to agree that there's a problem and to be willing to find solution to that problem. Number three is to, in a very creative manner, deploy security. See, before now, our mode of security has been very erratic. But we need to rethink our security strategy approaches. For instance, when communities, look, there is fear. The number one thing that we must realize that the indigenous are afraid that their land is about to be taken away from them. The indigenous are afraid that there is an attempt to lord it over them. So if we can relieve that fear, if we can create a situation where that fear goes away by federal government actions, through policies, through genuine approaches, if this can be done, then the people will relax, because whatever you are doing and the people are still afraid, they don't trust government actions. Remember, people don't trust government policies, they don't trust government actions. So whatever you do, whatever strategy you adopt, you will still have to go back to creating the environment that the people can begin to trust government. But the way it is now, that trust element is not there. And so any policy or strategy you are bringing on top of that will be short-lived.
Right, and that seems to be very, very fundamental. The issue of trust. I mean, governments, in Benue State, for example, the state governor, attempted to come up with anti-grazing laws, just like a few other states. And then there was a National Livestock Transformation Plan. All of this, in an attempt to solve this, crisis in a sustainable way, but they all seem to have fallen flat on their face. So let me ask you, Dr. Saleh Momale, what is the more sustainable measures that can be put in place to actually end this unnecessary killings? And would you say that we've become numb to the idea of killings? Every day we hear these numbers, they sound like statistics and not necessarily human beings. Is that part of what's further complicating issues?
I think rightly, like you said, the violence is seriously complicating issues and making it much more difficult for us to find amicable ways of bringing people together and rebuilding trust and confidence among the citizens. But suffice it to say that some of the measures that have been put in place, for example, in Kaduna State, if we look at the last 3 years, the Kaduna State in general, in the major metropolitan centers of Kaduna City, Kafanchan, and Zaria, we have not witnessed any significant crisis, unlike in the past years. If you look at again, if we take back since the 2011 post-election violence that set most of the southern parts of Kaduna State into the violent scenario, we can see many local governments that were the epicenter of some of this violence. We are seeing increasing level of social harmony. For example, like Kajuru, like Kachia, like Jama'a local governments, we are seeing increasing level of cooperation among the citizens, even in the efforts to deal with the criminal activities of banditry. And this is what we are trying. Our greatest challenges now is the problems in Zangon Kataf, in parts of Kaura local government, as well as in some pockets areas of Jama'a local governments. We have seen relative stability in Sanga, we have seen relative stability in in Kauru recently, as well as in Kachia. And Kagarku has been relatively more stable, as well as Jaba local governments. So we are looking at the community models that these communities in Sanga, in Jaba, in Kagarku, what are they doing to maintain this stability, notwithstanding the existing challenges? And we are replicating these models throughout the region and expanding it even into some parts of the northern senatorial zone in Kaduna to try to strengthen this architecture and have these robust engagements. Importantly, like you said, to deal with this issue, I think the role of the media is critical in shaping the narratives and trying to create the needed understanding. Secondly, we have to bring in the professionals, and I think we have been leaving them at the back seat. Professionals in the livestock sector, professionals in the crop production sector, to come, like David earlier said, to revolutionize the rural production system, which is threatened by rising population, land degradation, and changing climates. So we need to remodel our agricultural production systems that will lead to improved productivity, addressing unemployment, and revamping the livelihoods levels of the people. I think once we do that, coupled with strong government support in infrastructure development, service delivery in health and education, we'll be able to see more robust communities, more organized communities. If we cap this with serious interventions that target the youths, that try to build new narratives, that engages the media in a much more positive way, that see the media as partners in progress.
I think it's a good place for us to come in here, Dr. Saleh. I apologize, I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank you for your time, Dr. Saleh, Momale, and David Okoror. Many thanks for speaking with us on this show.